All right. Says that I am live. Be good to know if I am audible. Let a few more people show up. Ads. I'm just trying to look at my chat. All righty. Let's see. Happy New Year's Eve to everybody. I hope your holidays are going well. I really hope that you can hear me. Okay, cool. All right. I am coming through. Hopefully the audio quality is pretty good. I am using the mic that some of my Buy Me a Coffee supporters so generously purchased for me, and I've gotten to use it now in 2 or 3 videos, which is really, really exciting. I feel like I'm a real YouTuber now, like having the microphone is like a little bit of confirmation that this isn't just some sort of like fantasy that I've made up in my head. Like it's actually real. I am actually doing this thing and there are actually people who are taking me seriously, which given what I am talking about is a relief because I can't tell you how often I hear from former members who are so relieved that someone is telling the story. Not so much, I think, often just because someone is giving voice to the things that they've been through, but because it's getting their experiences out in front of other people. And when you've been through something really, really horrific or difficult, having an acknowledgement of what you went through, I think it means so much. And that's speaking as someone who's also been through traumatic things, not on the religious sense, but just in life, and having the support and the love of people around me made all the difference in my healing journey. And I think it's somewhat the same in this as well. So anyway, welcome to the end of the year, end of 2024 live stream. I wish I would have done this last year, but as we're going to discuss in this live stream, my mindset and just headspace with everything last year was in such a different place than it is today. It's been really, really interesting to spend some time reflecting, thinking back on where I was back then versus where I am today. And it's been an incredible journey. And a large part of that has been facilitated because of, or I should say, has been facilitated by this channel and by the people who have shown up to listen to the things that I have to say. And so I thought that it would be kind of fun to spend some time reminiscing and looking back on 2024 as a whole, particularly specifically in light of the work and the research that I have been doing here on the Deep Dive project. I thought that it would be fun to recap everything. Also, just good to recap everything because there's been so much that has happened. I think it's good to kind of step back and take stock of where we are now and just reflect and celebrate the fact that we made it through another year, a pretty tumultuous year. I think that for a lot of people, particularly if you live in the United States, but I don't want to act as if I think that the United States is the only country in the world or the only country that matters. I think for a lot of people in many different parts of the world, this was an incredibly challenging and emotionally charged year, and maybe also traumatizing in many ways. I mean, we've had crises playing out overseas and other countries that have been playing out in front of us, in front of the entire world to see, thanks to social media. We had the political upheaval happening here in the United States, which is by no means over. Don't get lulled into a false sense of security or think that the story is finished. It most certainly is not. And I think that the first couple of months of 2025 are going to be really, really interesting. But it's been a year. It's been a year, and here we are. We all made it one way or the other. We're all here together. And I am tremendously grateful for each and every one of you who has taken the time to pay attention to the research that I am doing. But I want to give people a chance to get on. I know initially I had talked about doing this live stream on like the 28th or something like that because I didn't want to clash with people's New Year's Eve plans. But then I was talking about it with my husband and I kind of realized that for the most part, unless I'm mistaken, most people, I feel like they celebrate New Year's Eve way later into the night because you want to be awake for the ball to drop and for the day to switch over and for it to become a new year and everything. And so I figured streaming earlier in the evening might be better and it wouldn't interfere with anybody's holiday plans. But of course, this live stream will be saved on my channel after the fact for anybody who is interested in watching it. But let's go ahead and start going over some of the 2024 major highlights. These are just the highlights that I have identified. Feel free to add your own into the comment section. I'm going to go over some like major highlights that I feel like are just worth remembering and looking back on. And then I have some personal highlights that are just a little bit more personal to me and to this channel that I want to get into as well. But I will be checking in on the chat from time to time as we go along. So by all means, feel free to let me know what your 2024 major highlights have been or what you think the major highlights for people to pay attention to should be. So, to start out the year, we had the Financial Times March article, The Opus Dei Diaries, which was written by Antonia Cundy. And that was such an incredibly well done piece of journalism. I was so excited to talk about that and so excited to see the positive press and the attention that was being given to the women who were speaking out about the experiences that they have alleged having while inside Opus Dei. And through that story, the Opus Dei Diaries, and through the research that I was doing into that and trying to give that story as much amplification as I could through my work here, I ended up finding out about the really important, in my opinion, very important 2016 French court case Tissier v. Opus Dei. And luckily, I think that court case is becoming a little bit more well known now, thanks to other things that we are going to get into, other things that happened this year. But I am going to continue to bring it up and mention it over and over and over again, just because it is such an important case. And for anyone who is here and is kind of confused and doesn't really know what is going on, for one thing, I could not give you a perfect summary of everything that we have gone over just in a quick minute or two, but in essence, I have been covering a Catholic organization called Opus Dei since 2020, when I became aware of some irregularities and some concerning testimonies from former members. And I was concerned about the fact that those stories were just floating around, were not being given due credit, and the people who were trying to raise some attention about what they had experienced were being more or less ignored. And I decided to start covering the issue. Things have kind of snowballed from there. You can go back and look at my channel and see the entire history of everything that has happened up to now with my coverage and everything. But I want to shout out Anne-Marie Allen and Tina Fogarty and Marguerite Joyce and all of the other brave individuals who have chose to speak up and speak out, both in Ireland and the UK, and then as well as in South America and elsewhere all around the world. And 2023, I feel like 2023, 2024 were really big years for people finding their voice and speaking out and finding a platform to share about the things that they have been through. So I just want to give that the credit and the attention that I think that it deserves. It's a really, really big deal when people decide to speak out. But also, I do want to mention that, for all that the past couple of years have been major, this is not new. This is not as if all of a sudden there are people just coming out of the woodwork who have something to say about this organization. Unfortunately, there is a pretty good track record now established of controversies related to Opus Dei, and they range from the relatively mundane and minor to the downright criminal. So, and all of that is to be contested in a court of law, I suppose. We can only speculate and we can only allege and we can only ask the good questions that need to be asked and hope that the people in the places of authority who are able to do the right thing to gain accountability are doing the jobs that they're supposed to be doing. But even with all of that said, there is a long track record established. There's a lengthy paper trail established of people attempting to raise the alarm about this organization, stretching back to its very inception in 1928 in Spain. So, and that information is all out there for anyone who cares to go dig it up and find it. It's not necessarily buried or secreted away or anything like that. It's relatively easy to find. It's just, I think, a topic that most people are not going to take the time to dig into. And that has been true up until here within the relative recent years. And I'm happy to be one of the people, not the only person, and probably not even the best person or the best qualified person, but one of the people who has started digging into all of this and piecing things together and creating a little bit more of a comprehensive timeline and bringing some things to public attention that are a little bit concerning and a little bit weird, and that, in my opinion, should be scrutinized just a bit closer than they have been. But the Financial Times article was incredible, and I have been so thrilled to have the opportunity to connect with some of the women who were featured in that story, Anne Marie Allen and Tina Fogarty. These are such incredible women. They are such strong voices for their cause and just for human rights in general. I find them such incredible, inspiring people, and I feel so proud to be able to say that I know them and that I have spoken to them and that they are these incredibly strong, resilient women. These are the kinds of people and the kinds of women that I have always looked up to, and to be able to say that I know them personally it fills my heart with so much joy and also sadness, because it had to happen under these circumstances. That is incredibly unjust, but I do believe in finding the silver linings in everything. And for me, at least, a silver lining, especially over the last year, has been connecting with more and more former members, these incredible people who are truly kind, devout, faithful people who come from a place of the best intentions in everything that they do in life, which is often how they ended up in Opus Dei in the first place, because Opus Dei recognizes those qualities in people and will, at least in my opinion, exploit them. Um, these are amazing, incredible, insightful, intelligent people. These are people who did not deserve the things that happened to them. And yeah, I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I won't go too overboard. But I have so much love for these people, and so much gratitude to them for their support of me and for their willingness to share their experiences and for the trust that they've put in me for sharing their stories. That's something that I don't take lightly. And I want to stress that, because I think that that can sometimes become obscured in the back and forth discourse and debate about the various facts that I present, and whether or not they jive with your particular worldview or the way that you perceive the world or anything like that. It's important to continue to come back to the biggest thing here, which is the people. And I love these people. Um, after that Financial Times article, the next thing that was kind of significant on my radar was the Project 2025 white paper, because that ended up tying into research that I had previously done into organizations like the Napa Institute and the Ethics and Public Policy Center. I always have to look at that one, the EPPC. Came up in all of this, and then individuals like Leonard Leo and Timothy Bush. These were people and organizations that I knew about and I'd already kind of mapped out prior to learning anything about Project 25. As far back as 2020 and 2021, I had started to look at these organizations and these individuals, and I had found some of their activity interesting, to say the least. And then around June to July was when I kind of found out about Project 2025, I guess around the same time that kind of everybody else did. And a lot of people took that situation a lot of different ways, ran with it to do a lot of different things. My reason for speaking on it was not necessarily because I wanted to make this big political statement, although that was definitely how a lot of people seem to perceive it. But it was purely because it was a few different things, I think. Part of it was relief, to finally be tying together the loose ends on some pretty sizable research that I had done that had just been kind of sitting on a back burner, simmering away, that I did not have a conclusion for, because I had already done research into Timothy Bush and the Napa Institute and the things that are kind of happening in Silicon Valley in California with some of these big players, like people like Peter Thiel, for example, the co-founder of PayPal and the biggest donor to JD Vance's senatorial campaign back in whenever that was that he ran for Senate in Ohio, 2022, don't quote me on that. I don't know the year. But at any rate, people like this, I had already been tracking these people. I'd already kind of been noticing their activity, but I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know how to tie it into anything substantial. I didn't know how to present it in any way that would have been coherent. And so I just kind of sat on it for a really long time until this past summer, when Project 2025 kind of came onto the collective radar and I started looking at it, and all of a sudden it was like the puzzle pieces organized themselves and the last few little things kind of clicked into place. And the picture that emerged for me was pretty concerning, not because it's some big right wing agenda versus some big left agenda or anything like that, but more so just because of the ethical implications, the human rights issues that I saw inherent with the Project 2025 white paper, that gigantic tome that they wrote. It really concerned me, and it concerned me because it tied into this research that I'd done and that correlated with this organization, Opus Dei. And this is my opinion. You're free to disagree with it, but I don't think that Opus Dei should be influencing public policy or influencing the government in any way. The same can be said of lots of other institutions, by the way. Like, this is not, I'm not only pigeonholing Opus Dei because I have it out for them and I want them to, I don't know. The same can be said of any organization. And I said this in that video, but I think it kind of got drowned out by everything else and by people's knee-jerk perceptions that kind of kicked in when they heard certain terms. There are lots of organizations, institutions, and there are lots of people who are active in our government and in global politics as a whole who are not favorable people, who are not people that I would look to as good leaders or people who should be representing the majority of the public. There are institutions that are inside public policy that are influencing the way our country is run, the way the world runs as a whole. If you don't know that, you really should familiarize yourself with that pretty quickly, because it's just a fact. It's just the way that the world is. There are lots of organizations like that. Opus Dei, though, happens to be the one that I am focusing on, though. And when it came up correlated with Project 2025, I couldn't just sit on what I knew. So I put out the information that I had that was connected with Project 2025. And I had some people get very bent out of shape about the fact that I chose to just focus on Opus Dei's sort of connection to Project 2025 instead of Project 2025 as a whole. But again, I wouldn't have been talking about it at all if it hadn't have been for what I knew about Opus Dei's connections to the people who were funding and organizing Project 2025. People like Timothy Bush and Leonard Leo and the Heritage Foundation fellow, what's his name? Roberts, and everybody else. You keep digging, the connections keep popping up. That was why I spoke about it. And it was a really interesting situation to live through, especially now looking at the results of the 2024 US presidential election. And that's again why I started out this live saying that despite the fact that I think we've gotten a bit of a respite from all of the chaos thanks to the holidays and the fact that people's attention has been pulled to family and to the holidays and investing time in those kinds of things, which is good, by the way. I think sometimes we're a little bit too hyper focused on politics and that kind of thing. But all that to say, it's by no means over. None of it is over. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the following year. But that white paper and that whole agenda made so many things that I did not understand about Opus Dei, particularly here in the United States, click into place with such clarity. It was incredibly illuminating. It felt like the scales, to use a biblical term, it felt like the scales had been pulled from my eyes and I could see. Um, it's a terrible truth, but it is the truth. And I would rather deal with an ugly reality than believe a pretty lie. So then in September, we got the news that Argentinian federal prosecutors were indicting high ranking members of Opus Dei for human trafficking and slave labor following the initiation of an investigation into Opus Dei in Argentina after the 43 former members spoke out in 2023 alleging the same treatment. That was a huge bombshell, and probably out of everything that I had been waiting on, out of all of the various little shoes I've been waiting to drop over the past year, I think the thing I was waiting to hear some progress on the most was this whole case in Argentina playing out between Opus Dei, now these federal prosecutors in Argentina, and the 43 former domestic workers of Opus Dei. When they spoke out in 2023, there was initially a lot of coverage and a lot of talk about the initial story and the facts of their allegations and so on and so forth. It was all very hopeful, but then things kind of died down, quieted down, and we didn't hear anything more for such a very long time. And it was kind of just went to the back burner, fell to the wayside, became something like in the back of my mind. And then September rolled around. This news came out and it was like, finally, we have something. And of course, it's not a conviction of guilt or anything like that. It's not the Argentinian government saying, you will pay these women what they're owed or anything like that. It's just the federal prosecutors basically saying, hey, there's a case here. We believe there's a case here and we're going to take it to court. But even the fact that it's made it to that point, considering how skillful Opus Dei has been in many, many cases in avoiding any type of meaningful litigation against them for allegations that former members bring forward, it's pretty significant. So I'm really hopeful that 2025 will see more. We'll see more development in this entire situation. I'm just forever rooting for these women and for their legal team, and I just hope and pray that they're able to make substantial progress in 2025. Let's see. So we had that happen. That was a big deal. And then in October, we had the publication of Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church by financial journalist Gareth Gore. And the subsequent press discussing that book has been really, really interesting. When the pre-orders were announced, or when the publication was initially announced earlier in the year, I think in February of this year, as soon as it was available for pre-order, I went out and I ordered it, and I was just waiting, and I ended up getting an advance copy from Gareth Gore. He was kind enough to give me an advanced copy, and I was able to read that. And as soon as I got my hands on it, I couldn't put it down. And again, it was illuminating. It filled in gaps for me in my knowledge of the history of Opus Dei, particularly in regard to Escriva. Out of everything that I've come to know and understand about Opus Dei, the thing that I perhaps have spent the least amount of time focusing on has been the founder himself, Jose Maria Escriva. Just because I feel like, for all that I haven't researched him exclusively as a person, like exhaustively focused on him, I feel like you can still pick up the Opus Dei has a flavor that is very much of Escriva, in my opinion, anyway, just because of the fact that they venerate him to such an extent, because of the fact that they have been accused of being a cult of personality around the founder, venerating him to a degree that is perhaps past what would be considered appropriate for the circumstances. So I feel like just by studying Opus Dei alone, you can come to understand Escriva to some degree, because he is so omnipresent in everything about the organization. And as Gareth's book Opus reveals, that is was initially perhaps a blessing in some regards, but I wonder if it will not ultimately end up being the curse that ends them, because there are so many things in Opus Dei that they are clinging to, I think, out of veneration of their saint. And they won't change those things because they believe that they are following out the plan that Escriva had very clearly for this organization. So there are problems inherent to that when you can't deviate from your modus operandi even a little bit, even to flex, to adapt to the world that you are now living in. You know, it's not 1930s Spain anymore. Opus Dei spread all around the world. But at any rate, that book came out, and it's incredible. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. I think most everybody that I have talked to has read it, or if they haven't finished, they've at least started it, which is awesome. Because again, I just think it's a really good history. It's written in such an understandable way, because it's a narrative. So I think that cuts down on the dryness of the material. It could potentially be very, very dry because, you know, we are talking about financial stuff from a certain point of view. I mean, that was how Gareth Gore got into the story in the first place, was from doing research on the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano, or was it Banco Popular? Am I confusing my bank names now? Either way, the bank that collapsed, he was researching it, and that's how he found out about this whole story. So it's coming from a financial perspective, but even so, like, I found it very easy to understand. I encourage everybody to read it and form your own opinions about it. But it is a pretty well written piece of research, if you ask me. And if you haven't already, I have an interview that I did with Gareth Gore. He was kind enough to come onto the channel, and I got to talk to him about writing, what it was like to write the book and researching everything. Got to get his perspective on a few different things, and it's a very good conversation. I hope you'll go and listen to it if you haven't already, and give me your thoughts on it when you do. It was really exciting to get to do that. That was the first time that I've ever got to do something like that. You know, I've interviewed people here and there, but it's been much more informal, and yeah, having the opportunity to talk to somebody like that who's doing this kind of research in such a niche topic like this is a big deal. So it was a lot of fun, and I really, really enjoyed it. Um, I have some articles pulled up that I want to look over just again to kind of look back and reminisce on the past year. But before we do that, let me go through and read. There are a few comments here that some of you have thrown in. Helen says, hello. Hi, Helen. Um, Sir Crumbly Blunder Truss. That is an epic username, and you are very welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Tim Nelson said, I'm here and ready for the deep dive. Yes. Take everything that I present and run with it. Read through my references. I don't just have those up there to like cover my own ass, although that is a big part of it. I want you to actually look at my sources and do your own research, ask your own questions, form your own opinions. Don't let me be the formation of your opinion. Form your opinion for yourself. Decide what you believe. Read Gareth Gore's book. If you don't like it, that's fine. That's totally valid. You don't have to like it. If you disagree with his portrayal, that is fine. If you think it's spot on, that's also fine too. I want you to think critically. That's the biggest goal behind the deep dive project is just to demonstrate that anyone can do this. Anyone can find this information, read through things, and come to conclusions about the world that we live in. It's time consuming, but it is possible. And I hope that this will encourage you to do that even just a little bit, because I think it's really, really, really important. And I'm afraid that in this world of quick and easy access to entertainment and to media and to information, we've become less and less likely to ask questions and to think critically. We've started to shut down some of our really important mental processes, and I hope that this encourages you to think about whether or not that applies to you and what you could do to change it. North Pole, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Being monetized is a whole new ball game, man. It is really, really interesting. I did not imagine that I would be able to do that this year. For anyone who doesn't know how YouTube works, it's not as if you can just create a YouTube channel and start putting up videos and you automatically make money. I mean, if that was the case, everybody would be doing it. You actually have to be able to build up a little bit of a following and have subscribers, have viewers, have people who are paying attention to what you're doing in order for YouTube to basically be able to justify monetizing your channel. And then they'll give you that perk, and then you can start making money. And it's not big money by any means, it's like $10 here and there. But it all does add up, and it all starts somewhere. And it's really crazy to be closing out the year. This is kind of getting into like my personal highlights a little bit. But it's crazy to be closing out the year with nearly 7,500 subscribers. 7,500 people just about have found what I am doing interesting and worthwhile enough to hit subscribe, which is just really crazy. When I started the year, I looked back. I started the year, I had like 288 subscribers, which, 288 people is still significant. Like, that's not anything to sneeze at. But it's definitely not enough to move the needle one way or another in terms of making an impact or getting the message out there or anything like that. But I was very, very fortunate in my timing with my story about Opus Dei and Project 2025. I managed to just get that out there. I mean, it was just everybody was kind of learning about Project 2025 at the same time. I just happened to get the video out there, and the timing was right, and it blew up. And now here we are. And that's how quickly it can happen, which is crazy. But, you know, it's like grinding and grinding and grinding for numbers of years before that happens. I have been making content on this platform for many, many, many years since I was in high school. And this is the first time that I've ever had anything that I do gain any kind of momentum. But I'm so glad that this is what's gaining the momentum. I'm so thankful that it wasn't my like vlogging or my, any of the other endeavors that I've had in the past that don't matter anymore. I'm so glad that those weren't the things that put me on a map in any way, sense, in any way, shape, or form. I'm so glad that it's been something like this because I do truly believe that this is important. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't see the value. And knowing that there are other people who feel the same way, again, it's like that validation, like the microphone. It's the validation that like I'm not crazy. Um, there is something to all of this, and I'm presenting it to the public, and the public are agreeing with me. And that's empowering. So imagine if it's empowering for me and I'm just the person, I'm just the messenger bringing all of this to you. Imagine if it's that empowering for me. How empowering is it for the former members of this organization to have people hearing their stories and saying, "We believe you. We're so sorry." Imagine how powerful that is. Let's see. Yes. Awesome usernames. Sir Crumbly Blunder Trust. I'm gonna chuckle every single time I see that username. He said, "I think Dr. Clint Heacock's podcast was where I first heard about Project 2025. Somebody else, Abysmios, said, "Bro, your research is well done and you should not give up on this path." Thank you. I don't intend to, although I am hopefully going to be branching out in topic material just a little bit. I really love this kind of thing. I never saw myself doing independent journalism at all. It's not my academic background, my professional background has been in pretty much it's all environmental science based. So independent journalism is not where I saw myself going, but it's so rewarding. Um, and I really enjoy the research process of it all, and I love to write, so that's really scratching an itch. Yeah, I don't plan on giving this up, but I do want to branch out. There are other human rights issues that I care about that I would like to shine attention on. So yeah, hopefully in the coming year, I just almost said Project 2025. That's a Freudian slip. In the coming year of 2025, hopefully I will get to branch out a little bit into other topics, start covering some other things. I did that a little bit this year with my coverage of just like the timeline of history with the Catholic organization, the Legionaries of Christ. That was really, really interesting. And I wanted to do that just to show parallels between Opus Dei and the Legionaries of Christ, because there are some interesting similarities there. And the Legionaries of Christ are another organization that has been accused of being sect-like in its practices. So, with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and start going through some of these articles. I just have them pulled up here on my computer screen. It's getting dark. Should I turn on the light? I'm going to turn on the light, but hopefully it doesn't wash me out. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay. And it is 4:30ish. I am planning on going until 5:30. So come and hang out for as long as you can. Let me know what your highlight of the year has been. I'd be really interested if you're a recent subscriber and hearing how you found my channel, just because I am still a small channel and still growing. So it's really interesting just to see how I am getting out there, because the algorithm moves in mysterious ways. But as we are recapping some of the highlights for this channel, I wanted to go over a couple of articles that I found that were really, really interesting. So I wanted to talk about an article that was published on the National Catholic Reporter, and I have all of my references for this live stream linked in like the live stream description. So if you want to go and read these things for yourself, you can find them linked down there. But this was written by somebody named Matthew Murray. And remember that name, because that is going to come back. But the title is "New Book on Opus Dei is Salacious but Fails to Offer Critical Insight." This is from National Catholic Reporter. So Matt writes, Almost since Opus Dei was founded in 1928 in pre-Franco Spain, the conservative Catholic group has been described as a shadowy, secretive, cult-like sect. Every few years, that image, which clings to the organization like stinkweed, is reinforced in the press. As long ago as 1957, Time magazine referred to the members as the White Masons. Not for nothing did the writer Dan Brown smell the opportunity to depict a fictionalized Opus Dei as the vessel for a dangerous, cultish secret society in his bestseller, The Da Vinci Code. I'm going to insert my opinion as we read through this, my perspective on these articles. But while I understand why Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code is always brought up. I mean, I myself have brought it up in the past. I understand why it gets brought up just because everybody has heard of the Da Vinci Code. It made such a splash back when it first came out, back when the book was released, and then the movie was made. Oh my gosh, people at EWTN were losing their minds. It was a very interesting time to be paying attention to the hum and buzz of the conservative world. But I mean, it's such a hack piece of literature, right? Like, I don't think anybody is reading the Da Vinci Code thinking that it's like actually good, like factual literature, because it's like a fiction, right? So while I understand, like, yes, everyone knows about it, but it's not a good book. So I find, like, when it gets brought up, it's sort of, I don't know, it's just like you can't use that as an accurate example of like Opus Dei. It's a caricature. It's a it's a caricature of the organization in every sense of the word. And I feel like Opus Dei uses that to be like, see, anything else that's like critical of us in any way, shape, or form is just as kooky as that albino monk over there. And it's like, okay, well, now you're being like disingenuine and just not like, critically like honest with yourself. But that's just my opinion. Somebody said, found, and I'm so sorry, Eric, found your material basically as a spiritual being. I'm here to bring down all of man's religions, as I have never found any evidence that any religion has a monotony, truth, and connection to source. That is a perspective, sir. I mean, look, the thing about religion, and this is just my personal opinion, I think that it can be really, really, really beneficial. Organized religion can serve a collective good. I think there are numerous examples of that all around the world, from multiple different religions, not just Christianity, but multiple different religions around the world. It can be used to mobilize people for a common good, a common cause, and it can also encourage people to practice good things that are just going to be beneficial for society, to be peace loving and to take care of your neighbor, and to help the downtrodden, to care for the afflicted, all of these very good things. But it can also be used for a lot of negative things. And unfortunately, I feel like there are a lot of examples of that at this point in the world, throughout the world's history. There are numerous examples of religions being essentially hijacked by people who want to utilize that system in order to grow or gain power or influence for themselves. You see that time and time and time and time again. And so for me personally, it's really hard for me to look at a religion, and even if they have done good and beneficial things, not just kind of wonder to myself, how long is it going to last? And does the good outweigh the bad? And I mean, we have to answer that question for ourselves individually. I don't think that like anybody can make that determination for everybody else. That's why I think having freedom of religion is so incredibly important. It's why I support the freedom of religion so much, despite the fact that I myself might not subscribe to organized religion. I want to have the choice to do that or not do that. I want everyone around me to have the freedom and the choice to do that or not do that. I think that that is an inalienable right that we should all have. That is a tangent. Let's get back to this article railing against the book. So they go on to write that, let's see, I'm gonna skim through here because I'm not going to read the whole thing. They get into some of the history of the organization, which I'm just going to assume everybody here already knows. And if you don't know it, you can go and read up on it in your own time. Um, but they say that because of its secrecy and reach, it has drawn scrutiny from the Vatican. Under Pope John Paul II, Opus Dei was celebrated and elevated to a prelature, with Escriva declared a saint. Pope Francis has been warier, with the organization becoming the focus of reform efforts amid a fresh round of controversies. I don't necessarily love the way that that is worded because it almost implies that um, the Pope is just like being a party pooper for some reason and not like being supportive of this great and long-standing organization that John Paul II so clearly loved and wanted to see flourish in the Catholic Church. But anyway, um, and then they say among the worst of those are allegations of human trafficking in France's native Argentina. Prosecutors there launched an investigation of members of the organization in September, accusing them of human trafficking and slave labor. Amid persistent complaints and lawsuits are claims that Opus Dei has recruited poor young rural girls in Argentina with promise of education and a better life, only to consign them to years of hard work with no pay. It is the broadest claim ever made against the organization, which it has categorically denied. Which has categorically denied the allegations. Sometimes the way these articles are written do not lend themselves well to being read. So, let's see. While his writing can at times be breathless, Matt goes on to say, here Gore writes with genuine insight and authority regarding the details of the bank collapse and the involvement that Louis Valls Taberner and his brother had in the whole affair. And that makes sense because that is Gore's background. He is a financial journalist by trade. So the thing that he is going to be able to speak the most confidently on is going to be the financial aspect of the entire thing. The scale of Opus Dei's, Gore writes with genuine insight and authority. The scale of Opus Dei's reach and breadth of its holdings in its heyday is remarkable. The early chapters on Escriva are more mixed. Those unfamiliar with his story will find his biography interesting. They will gain understanding of how Opus Dei grew, helped by its ties to the government of Francisco Franco, and why the organization has been controversial from its early days. That is all true. Then they go on to say, but Gore can't hide his disdain for the founder, and that brings a tone of snideness into the book. He is snarky about Escriva's claim that the idea for Opus Dei came directly from God. In his telling, the organization grew through deception, fraud, and money laundering, as well as the protection of powerful men in and out of the church. So this was pretty interesting to me. When I read Opus, I went into it prepared to pick up on some type of animosity, maybe towards either Opus Dei or towards the Catholic Church as a whole from Gore. In essence, I was primed to keep my eyes peeled for whether or not he had an axe to grind against Opus Dei. And by and large, from my perspective in reading the book, I didn't really see that. I saw him being very critical of the organization and critical of the people representing the organization from page 1 of the book. But that kind of makes sense. I mean, that was why the book was written. Consider the title. This was not going to be a favorable expose of this organization. You don't accuse an organization. You don't correlate an organization's name with human trafficking in the title unless you're prepared to get into some really serious shit. So, on the one hand, you expect it to be pretty critical and pretty strongly worded, but by the same token, I was not put off by the tone. And I like to think that I am pretty well equipped to detect that kind of thing because of the fact that I was raised Catholic by parents who made all of their children aware of the way that people who do not love Catholicism and are or have animosity towards Catholics will speak about Catholicism and about Catholics in general. So I was kind of prepared to see that, and I just didn't in the book. I'm really curious if anybody else feels differently, if you have an example. But I had an excerpt that I wanted to pull up from the book that was a direct quote, or a place where Gore was quoting um, Escriva as having said something. And I just want to pull it up so that I can read it again with you guys, because I'm just curious what you think. Let's see. So this is early on in the book, and I have it on like Kindle reader, and it messed up the formatting, so I don't know the page number for this, but you could find it pretty easily, I think. So this is in Gore writing about Escriva's like early days, about his childhood, about the hardships that he suffered, basically because of the fact that his family lost everything that they had. It's honestly a really, really sad story, and he had to overcome a lot. I have a lot of sympathy for child Jose Maria Escriva, because I think it's pretty apparent from reading his story that he had a very, very difficult childhood, and probably felt that sense of loss and like lack of economic status, that made a very real impression on him. And I think that it could potentially explain a lot of different things about Opus Dei. But that is a conversation perhaps for another time. Here, though, the Gore's writing about the various hardships that Jose Maria Escriva's family suffered. And he says that the events deeply affected the boy and prompted him to question why God would inflict such suffering on good, devout people while other less pious families lived free of such hardship. And there's a quote here. It's quote, "I realized," and I'm assuming this is Jose Maria Escriva, "I realized that God, in some ways, has to reward them on earth since he won't be able to reward them in eternity," he concluded, basically saying that, like, less holy families who had good things happen to them, who never suffered the hardships that his very devout Catholic family did, were essentially being given nice things by God because they're going to go to hell when they die, is the essential implication, which is bleak. And then it goes on, "They also feed the ox," this is Escriva saying this, "they also feed the ox that will go to the slaughterhouse." End quote. His reasoning betrayed a gnawing sense of entitlement, righteousness, and a certain darkness in his personality. So I suppose you could quibble and debate how you perceive that quote, how you perceive Escriva saying that, essentially, if you have good things happen to you in this life, it might be because you're not going to have eternal happiness in the next. I suppose you could interpret that a few different ways, that you could see that through a few different lenses. And it is everyone's right to draw their own conclusions and feel however they want to feel about that. Me personally, I didn't read that and go, oh, wow, he's being really critical of Jose Maria Escriva. But I also have bias that I have to be aware of here, coming from this thing from the perspective that I do, wherein I already know a lot about Opus Dei and a lot about Jose Maria Escriva. I have gained so much of my insight from former members through them sharing their experiences and the difficult and oftentimes terrible things that they allege having experienced. My bias is that my perception of this organization is not a good one. And so perhaps I would go into reading this book less likely to react negatively to something like that than someone who doesn't have all of these preconceived ideas would. I don't know. But in addition to that, something that's I think is pretty interesting, this is a critical article, and it's okay that it's critical of Gareth Gore's book. But it's interesting that it was written by that fellow. I told you to remember his name, Matthew Murray. And the reason that that's interesting is because over on the r/Opus Dei exposed community, which is an anonymous community for former members or their family members or anyone interested in learning more about Opus Dei can kind of gather to get information and learn more, ask questions, get support, the whole nine yards. Somebody posted that article that Matthew Murray wrote on the Opus Dei exposed community. And in the comments, somebody said, interesting reviewer. I have this post linked down below if you want to click on it and go read through it and read the comments. But somebody commented and they said, interesting viewer. And they included a screenshot and it's like a little bio about Matthew. And it says, Matt Murray is the executive editor of the Washington Post. He previously was the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones News Wires. Murray holds bachelor's and master's degrees in journalism from Southwestern University and lives in New York with his family. And they said, editing to add blue sky thread by Gore about how odd it is for the Washington Post executive editor to be writing an article for the National Catholic Reporter. And I think that that's really, really interesting too. The web is webbing, everything is connected, everybody knows everything. Somebody else, the original poster, responded to that comment and they said, yeah, it shows that he's got allies and friends who have gone to recollections and such, and or that he respects the few high-level actual supernumeraries and cooperators that Opus has in its men's branch. I was really surprised to see that someone with his pedigree is now editor of the Washington Post. Things change, I guess. So I just thought that that was interesting. I wanted to include that article because, it's being critical of Gareth Gore's book, which is fine. You can be critical of it. You can not like it. It cannot be your cup of tea. Everybody's entitled to their opinions. We all have them. But in this sense, I just thought it was kind of interesting for this particular critical review, given who it was written about, given who it was written by, given what it was written about, and given who that person is and the connections that they could maybe potentially have to people that are wrapped up in this whole thing. It's just kind of interesting, just something to have on your radar. I don't know. It might not mean anything, but Opus Dei is heavily invested in communications, telecommunications, and media, entertainment, the whole nine yards. So, the web is webbing. Read through some comments here. Kevin Stanhope asked, who are those cuties behind you? So those are my two best friends. The one that's sleeping right over there, I'm backwards, so I'm like, the one that's sleeping right here is Apollo, and the blonde one behind me is River. And they are the best dogs, the best friends that anybody could ever ask for. I feel very, very blessed to have them. Dogs are cool. I like dogs. I love all animals. I don't discriminate, but dogs are really, really cool. And I like to be active, and I spend a lot of time outside, and they're the perfect companions for that kind of thing. And it's cool to get to see the world and have experiences kind of through their lens, because they approach everything with this sort of like sense of like childlike wonderment almost. Everything is new, everything's exciting, everything's fun. And I just think that that's a kind of a good attitude to try to foster in life towards change and new experiences and stuff, because it can get really easy to get stressed out about everything, and they're a good reminder to keep it light. So D.F. Hepner said, I found your work when you did the link to Project 2025. Just another example of Christians taking over as they did with the Northern pagan celebrations. I mean, it's a tale as old as time, right? You have this push and pull between different ideological perspectives, and the pendulum is always swinging back and forth, and it never returns to dead center. It never returns to an equilibrium. It's always teetering back and forth. And I think studying history is really, really important for a number of reasons, right? Like, it's important to know where we've come from, to understand the various factors that created the world and the society that we currently live in. But beyond that, I think that if you study history, it becomes easier to see a pattern. There's an ebb and flow to the way that life is lived here on this planet. Even if you pull back and look at it from a macro scale, with the rise and fall of nations and countries, with wars and floods and plagues, there's an ebb and flow to everything. And it's important to study history, because if you don't familiarize yourself with that and learn how to spot things before they become these huge problems, then you kind of end up living in a state of constant fear and terror, because you are going to be constantly shocked by each new thing that happens. Each new horror that is placed onto your radar is going to rock you to your core. um, we live in a world that gives us access to a lot of information, and I think sometimes most of it isn't good. But um, it's important to be able to step back and disconnect from all of that. So, all right, where are we? Just a quick reminder that all of my references and everything are linked down in the description below. So if you want to read through any of the things that I'm going over here, you can find all of that stuff linked down below. And I hope you go and look at it. So another article that I want to look at, this was published on the Buenos Aires Herald, and it was written by Valen Irasibar, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. But the title is Understanding the Bombshell, Opus Dei Human Trafficking Indictment. In Argentina, poor rural girls as young as 12 were allegedly lured away from their families and coerced into decades of servitude. Journalist Paula Bistagnino explains the case. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. I apologize for any names that I mispronounce, any proper nouns that I mispronounce. I do my best, but as the record will show, sometimes I don't quite nail it. And shout out Paula for the amazing journalism that she has done, getting all of this information about this indictment and everything that is unfolding between Opus Dei and Argentinian authorities out there for people to kind of follow. It's really, really important work. But I'll just read through some of this article. Probably not through the whole thing, but I'll read through some of it because I do think it's good. And it kind of summarizes where we are now with this entire court case in Argentina. And again, like I said earlier on in the live stream, I feel like this is such an important situation. Like we really, I'm going to keep coming back to it, keep highlighting it, and continue to follow it to wherever it may ultimately conclude. Because anytime there's any kind of litigation or potential litigation that could be carried out against an organization like this, it's just worth paying attention to. But the article starts, for decades, the shadowy Roman Catholic organization Opus Dei has recruited poor rural girls in Argentina on the promise of education and a better life. Instead, they have ended up working for years with no pay and found themselves unable to retire when they age, even when they suffer serious health problems. Over the years, several of them have filed legal complaints, but none have prospered. Then, in September 2024, Argentine federal prosecutors handed down a bombshell indictment accusing high-ranking members of the Roman Catholic organization Opus Dei of human trafficking and slave labor. It is the first time an organization within the Catholic Church has faced accusations of this magnitude. So this is a really, really big deal. This is super significant. I think it should be on everybody's radar, especially if you are Catholic or if you are someone who cares about, follows, advocates for human rights in any way, shape, or form. This is a really big deal. Although there are 44 cases cited in the investigation, only 4 are included in the human trafficking indictment because most occurred before Argentina's human trafficking law went into force in May 2008. Due to statutory limitations, 3 may soon be out of time. The Herald spoke to Paula Bistagnino, an investigative journalist and author whose work was cited in the judicial proceedings, about the inner workings of the highly insular and influential institution. Bistagnino went into the details of the Opus Dei, how the charges came about, and the importance of the indictment. So this article is set up as a Q&A interview style. I'm not going to read all of the questions, but again, go and read through this article if you haven't already, because it kind of summarizes everything in a really nice way and just kind of gets us all on the same page with this situation. So let's see. It says, what exactly, I want to read this question. What exactly has the Argentine judiciary presented against the Opus Dei? This is a judicial case that stemmed from an individual criminal complaint from a lawyer who read media coverage of the Opus Dei. He filed a complaint with the state anti-trafficking agency Protex. Although the women involved and multiple witnesses, Protex can depict a system of recruitment, capture, and exploitation. In the end, there are 44 cases of women who were subjected to this between the 1980s and 2015. The complaint was filed in the federal judiciary, which continued the investigation alongside Procuraduria. Based on that, we get the accusation against Opus Dei's maximum authorities of human trafficking and labor exploitation over the past 40 years. Most of the Opus Dei consists of lay people, but its upper echelons are religious. 5 priests who led the organization over the years stand accused. 4 were regional vicars, the maximum authority of the region, in this case Rio de la Plata, and 1 was in charge of the female branch. What we have now isn't just a complaint. It's an indictment based on the investigation. The prosecutor's office handed it over to federal judge Daniel Rafegas, who's asking for a few additional measures before summoning these religious authorities to testify and explain how this system works. So this is serious. This is way more than just an accusation. This is way more than just a salacious article in a paper somewhere. This is the federal authority of a country coming forward and putting this out there. And they extrapolate on that. They ask, why is this indictment significant? And it says it's the first time the Catholic Church has been accused of having an organization within it commit the crime of human trafficking. Well, women specifically, and it's the first mass complaint against the Opus Dei for such serious crimes in its almost 100 years of existence. There have also been cases against individuals or civil associations linked to it, but never against its senior leaders. And a good example of that would be the Tissier v. Opus Dei case from 2016. And I'm just skimming through, see if there's anything else in here I want to make sure I highlight. This is good. They ask, what would you want to see happen next? And the response says, every woman I've interviewed over the years has said she wanted justice. I'm telling you guys, if you could see, if I didn't pre-record, and then edit and upload these videos, if you could see what happens behind the scenes when I'm trying to read through my script and read these quotes and things, sometimes it's like, does she know how to read? Every woman I've interviewed over the years has said she wanted justice. Although they've changed some things, there are still women entering the organization in those conditions. They're still Opus Dei servants, and although they've changed some of the rules, the process is the same. I think it's important that this judicial case keeps growing across the region because these weren't the only women affected. This happened all over Latin America, in Europe, and beyond. There are testimonies in Spain and Ireland where a case is also being opened. Right now, it may seem like a small group in Argentina was doing this, but it was part of a systematic working matrix by the organization across the world. And I myself have more or less made the exact same observation just based on the research that I've done and everything that I've read. I've said many different times that country to country, region to region, the playbook that Opus Dei members seem to follow for their behavior, how they go about getting set up in a particular society, getting integrated into that society, connecting with the people that live there, recruiting the people that live there, the whole 9 yards. It's all very very much cut and dry, par for course. What you see is what you get. It doesn't ever change. It's going to be the same in Australia as it is in the Philippines, as it is in Ireland, as it is in the United States, as it is in South America. Like, it is just the same everywhere you go. And that is one of the big reasons why I don't just take these single testimonies from these single individuals speaking out just as a standalone thing. When I read these experiences, I'm thinking to myself, this is one person's account. If knowing what I know about this organization, knowing how militant, how cut, like, I think it keeps saying cut and dry, but like cookie cutter, like how really militant it is. Everybody follows the exact same playbook. Knowing that, I cannot actually read these stories and think to myself, "Oh, this is just a one-off." How many other people is this happening to? That's the question that's running in the back of my mind in every single case. We may never know the answer. The final question in this article is, what would you say to Opus Dei authorities if you could? And the response says, they have the opportunity to repair the damage that they caused to many people who trusted them and also worked for them. When Opus Dei responds, they say these women were part of the family. Instead of denying it the way they have and even putting them down, accusing these women of lying, they could ask for forgiveness, implement reparations, and change their operating model. In any case, that's what I said before this indictment in the judiciary. Now they have to answer the summons, and the justice system will decide. And I think that that is ultimately as it should be. I don't think that these situations should be handled in-house in any case, under any circumstances. I think that that opens this kind of thing up to corruption just way too easily. I think that the justice system is exactly where this kind of thing belongs. And we hope that justice is served, that people who are innocent will be cleared of all wrongdoing. People who are guilty will pay for their decisions and their actions. And the people who suffered because of it will get the justice that they deserve. So since, they were referencing in here Opus Dei's response and their behavior about this entire thing, and that's definitely something that I have talked about as well, just the way that they have chosen to respond to these various accusations, especially within the past year, has been pretty underwhelming. I wanted to talk about this article that I found. This was published on November 2nd, so just a month ago, about 2 months ago. And based on what I was seeing online, it's been the most recent statement of any sort that has been made by Opus Dei about what their plans for the future are in light of everything that has happened. And I thought it would be kind of interesting to read through this because it's not very long. Again, I probably won't read the whole thing. You can go and read it below if you want to, but just to kind of like test the waters and see where Opus Dei is at with everything right now, because I think it's interesting. So this was published on The Pillar, which is a Catholic website, Catholic news website. And the title says, Head of Opus Dei says prelature is undertaking process of healing. The prelate of Opus Dei said he wants to help bring healing to anyone who has been hurt by the prelature, while 4 members are facing investigations over human trafficking allegations in Argentina. It's quite the picture. So in the body of the article, they write, Monsignor Fernando Ocaires. I have to say, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce his name. Ocaires. I have to decide. Monsignor Fernando Ocaires. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. I'm sorry if it's wrong. I also kind of don't care. Anyway, he said Opus Dei created a listening commission after 43 former numerary assistants in Argentina denounced the prelature in 2021 for poor working conditions and unpaid salaries. Oh yeah, it wasn't 2023 that all that came out. It was 2021. So it was even longer ago. We've been waiting for news. I agree, Carlos. Who cares? The Argentinian Attorney General's office is now investigating four priests of Opus Dei in Argentina over charges of human trafficking. Quote, "We created the first office of healing and resolution to solve every individual conflict," O'Kairis told the Pillar. "It was a cause for great joy for us to reach agreements with many people, which also helped us to offer a personal and concrete request for forgiveness." The broad listening helped to relieve the pain of those who belonged to the institution for a while or looked into it for help and accompaniment but could not find it. After this job, which is beginning a process of healing, we are creating similar procedures in other countries, he added. So that's all very well and good and nice. My biggest question is, he says, it was a cause for great joy for us to reach agreements with many people, which also helped us to offer a personal and concrete request for forgiveness. That is wonderful, if that actually happened. And I'm not saying that Opus Dei is obliged to trot these people out as proof positive that they have actually been taking positive measures to try to address the wrongs that people allege having suffered while they were in this organization. I can understand why that might be seen as distasteful and something that you wouldn't want to do. But by the same token, if things are so great now, if everybody is back on the same page and everybody's friends again, and all of these people, he says in this quote, many people have been addressed and they've been forgiven and they've had this meeting of the minds and saying kumbaya and everybody's held hands around the campfire. Where are these people? Like, from my point of view, if I had been a part of an organization and then I left under duress because some things had happened, and then I shared my story with some people, but then the organization didn't really seem like they cared. But then 30, 40 years later, they come back and they say to me personally, "Hey, we actually truthfully, sincerely recognize that you went through something terrible. We are so incredibly sorry. Here's some money, and please tell us what else we can do." I don't know. I'm spitballing here. I'm not saying that's what was said, but let's just hypothetically say, like, I was in a situation like that with some organization. I think that if I saw that organization being attacked ostensibly by these evil players who just want to tear down this good and holy thing and don't want to pay any attention to the good things that they've done, I might feel compelled to come out and say something, you know? I might feel compelled to come out and say, "Hey guys, just so you know, everything's not perfect, but like I had a bad experience and they did do the right thing. They did come forward and apologize to me and help me get back on my feet." Like, you would think maybe one or two people would have done that by now if this was actually happening. If Opus Dei has actually reached agreements with many people, as the prelate said, where are they at? Where are these people? Show me the money. I just don't buy it. Call me a hater. I just don't buy it. O'Kairis' comments come as Opus Dei undergoes a process of canonical reform at the direction of Pope Francis. The personal prelature, the only one of its kind in the Catholic Church, will celebrate its 100th anniversary in 2028. Founded by St. Jose Maria Escrivá, the movement places an emphasis on the universal call to holiness and the responsibility of lay people to seek holiness in their ordinary lives. In the last 2 years, Pope Francis has published 2 motu proprio documents initiating a canonical reform of Opus Dei. The first, published in July 2022, stipulated that the prelature would be supervised by the dicastery for clergy rather than the dicastery for bishops and would need to submit a yearly report on its work instead of a 5-year report as it had done previously. There's all this back and forth about the paperwork and the whys and the wherefores and the canon law of it all. The long and short of it is that things are still very much up in the air. And they say that, in other words, Opus Dei's lay members, recognized as such by the organization's statutes, will likely not be considered members of the prelature properly speaking, but simply organic cooperators. And this is very, very important and something that also needs to be stressed. This is something that, if you are a Catholic, is probably going to be more significant than if you don't really know anything about the religion. But, within the Catholic Church, there is the Code of Canon Law, and it is supposed to set out how everything is run in the church from the top to the bottom and for every single person in between. And Opus Dei, as a church institution, is bound or is supposed to be bound by that same canon law. And there has been a lot of discussion about whether or not they have actually been in alignment with the Vatican and with canon law. Um, Actually, that's something that is spoken about a bit in Opus. If you've read that book, then you might know the part that I am referring to. Um, but in all of that, the sticking point, the point that's important, the thing that is, important to keep in mind is the fact that these people who think that they are committing to and joining this organization as a full-fledged member, according to the church, according to canon law, the thing that governs the church, the big pie in the sky, doesn't even recognize these people as members of Opus Dei, which means that Opus Dei has no authority over these people. But Opus Dei is telling these people that they do have authority over them and that they are members. And it's all getting very muddy and very confusing, particularly for the people who are on the inside, I would have to imagine. And I think it'll be curious. It'll be interesting to see. I'm curious to see what will happen in the next few years if things get hammered out a bit more and if there's any clarity that is gained, because right now things are very, very unclear. And I think that is not good. Skimming through here to see if there's anything else I want to read. So, commenting on the reforms, these motu proprios, Okyres lamented, the law's difficulty in framing new pastoral phenomena is evident. Maybe the protagonism the Second Vatican Council wished for the laity still has a long road ahead. Which I'm wondering, is that like snide remark on his part about Vatican II, about not liking, about like there being something wrong with Vatican II? Because that is also something that Opus Dei is kind of known for, as being anti-Vatican II. So would saying that maybe the protagonism the Second Vatican Council wished for the laity still has a long road ahead, would that be seen as like snarky? Or is that just an observation of fact? I'm not really sure, because this is like the inside baseball of the Vatican, and I just don't keep my finger on that pulse enough. But if you're watching this and I'd be curious in hearing your thoughts on that statement and how you interpret that. If you see it as snarky or if you just see it as like an observation of fact. But he goes on and he says, I can guarantee that the current modification of the statutes requested by the Holy Father is being conducted with a fundamental criterion of adjusting to the charism of Opus Dei, which today in many places is better understood and shared. Law, which is so necessary, follows life, follows the incarnated message to support and give continuity to life, he added. In addition to the criminal complaint by 43 former members in Argentina, Opus Dei, known by its members simply as The Work, has faced other challenges in recent years. These include a dispute over its flagship shrine in Spain and claims of a systematic influence campaign meant to shape U.S. government policy. Regarding these latter claims, Okyres said, I cannot tell you much because it's a fantasy, which is interesting. Again, I mean, Opus Dei has categorically denied every single accusation, especially in regard to human trafficking and slave labor and that kind of thing. They've categorically denied those accusations. And even in regard to these other things, they are denying that as well, which is an interesting choice. In September, New York Magazine published an article entitled How Opus Dei Conquered D.C., claiming that Opus Dei, quote, is focused on marshaling the people who have various forms of authority over the masses to its various revanchist causes. The article says Opus Dei targets and attracts people like Donald Trump's current running mate J.D. Vance, a convert to conservative Catholicism by way of Opus Dei connected clergy and influencers. It claims that numerary priests, affiliated converts, and their allies have worked in the courts and in league with non-Catholic faith-based politicians to crush reproductive rights, oppose gay marriage, and bash down the wall between church and state through Congress and at the Supreme Court. For his part, Okairis called those claims hypotheses and conspiracy theories, and said that they mention people by name that nevertheless are not members of Opus Dei. I'm sure they are all fine Catholics, but these outlets simply manipulate the truth to try to involve an institution of the church in political matters. In Opus Dei, we don't give advice or orders of a political nature of any kind to anyone. If anyone would do it, the rest of us would rebel against that. It's contrary to our spirit. There are good Catholics that vote for different parties and candidates according to their sensibility, he argued. Akira said he believes that some of these issues come from misunderstandings about the role of laity in politics. And he continues to wax on and on and on about that, and you can go and read that if you want. The main thing that I am getting from this article, the main reason why I wanted to bring it up, is that from the way that it's written, I am of the opinion, of the perspective, that Opus Dei is very aware of the fact that things are a little bit uncertain for them right now, that they are in a bit of a spotlight, if you you could say. So they are playing their cards very close to the chest. They're saying things like, we want to establish channels for healing and for remediation, all of these various things, which is more of what they've been saying up to now. But again, without a whole lot of substantial progress or really anything significant to demonstrate that that is actually true, to demonstrate that they're actually following through on the things that they're saying that they're going to do. I mean, quite some time ago, they said that they were going to establish and develop these listening channels and these ways for former members to seek some type of compensation for their years that they were not paid, and so on and so forth. But when you actually dug into that, I dug into it. And when you actually dug into that and looked into like what exactly this whole process looked like, all it was an email address. It was just an email address that someone can email. And what are you supposed to do? Email Opus Dei and be like, "Hi, remember me? You didn't like me much then. You probably like me less now. And you didn't pay me, by the way. I'd like some money, please." How do you think that's going to go? I don't know. Again, call me cynical, call me jaded. If I saw substantial, significant, obvious efforts being made by people representing Opus Dei to connect with these former members and to give them the help that they so clearly need, if I was actually seeing that, then that would be one thing. But I'm not. I hope things are changing. I hope things do change, because I don't think it's realistic to think that this organization is just going to go away, because I don't see that happening, given what I know about Opus Dei. But then also, by the same token, if it's not Opus Dei, it's just going to be some other organization that's pulling this type of thing. Unfortunately, there is no shortage of vulnerable people in this world. And because of that, is no shortage of people who are willing to exploit that vulnerability for their own means, for their own end. And I think that regardless of the intentions that invested parties may have had back in the beginning, I think it is pretty hard to look at the fruits of Opus Dei's labor now and see the organization as anything other than toxic, and in serious need of reform. So I think the best that any of us can do, because we have no power over what happens with Opus Dei. None of us. No, it's not. Unless you are some kind of individual, I don't think that any of us here have the ear of Pope Francis. None of us have the power to meaningfully move this thing in a positive direction. But what we do have is the World Wide Web at our disposal. We have communities like r/Opus Dei Exposed and Opus Libris. We have books like Inside Opus Dei by Carmen Del Tapia, Maria del Carmen Tapia, and now Opus by Gareth Gore, and articles the the web over, we have all of this stuff at our fingertips. We can get our hands on it, we can read it, we can absorb it, we can pass it on to other people, and we can share that information. Knowledge is power. The truth will set you free. And I think that for this particular situation regarding this particular organization, those two things have to be what are guiding the efforts that we make to help these people, to elevate these stories, to do anything that we can. It has to come from a place of wanting to elevate truth for the sake of freedom. So, anyway, that is pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about. I had planned to stream for an hour and a half, and we are sitting right at an hour and a half now. Let me take a look through these chats real quick and see if there's anything I need to respond to. Maria said, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just words. If their words were true, it would stand to outside scrutiny. I agree with you, Maria. I absolutely agree. I think if you look at any organization ever that has received scrutiny or been subject to some type of scandal, the ones that chose to handle it properly, you can tell. It's super obvious. It's not hard to tell. The ones who don't, it's super obvious. You can tell. Which one do you think Opus Dei is? It's up to your opinion. Let's see. LWB said, do you have further interest to research other institutions of the Catholic Church? For example, how Guatemala AG is indicting Catholic charities and the U.S. Fed government for child trafficking. Yes, I do. Like I said, I do want to research other stuff. If you have a tip or an article or a story, a personal anecdote, something that you want to share, something that you think should be on my radar for whatever reason, the best way to do that is to send me an email. You can send me an email to the email that is in the description of every single one of my episodes, or you can just send it to the deep dive project at protonmail.com. It's all one word, the deep dive project at protonmail.com. Send me anything that you've got. I'll take it all. I'm constant, I'm always looking for information, but I'm only one person. I can only look so much. If I'm focusing on one story, and I am kind of currently in the middle of focusing on a particular situation, a particular angle with this whole thing, it makes it harder for me to pay attention to everything else. So by all means, I'm always happy to get your recommendations for topics, for things that I should look into, people I should connect with, podcast episodes I should listen to, books I should read, whatever. I love the free exchange of information and ideas, so bring it on. Abysmios commented, unfortunately, people like you and us will have to be citizen auditors of these various groups. Yes, unfortunately, that is the world that we live in. Unfortunately, we cannot just sit back and assume that the people that are in positions of authority have our best interests at heart, that they are representing the things that we care about. Unfortunately, we can't just sit back and assume that the systems that we have at place in our country, various countries, are going to work the way that they're supposed to, because they can be subverted by people with their own agendas. Unfortunately, we have to pay attention and we have to be engaged and we have to care just a little bit. We have to care about the world that we live in, because we are all here together. We're all stuck on this rock together, and none of us are getting out of here alive. So I believe it behooves all of us to do our best to create the world that we want to live in. And for many of us, that means being attentive, paying attention. And when something seems weird, when somebody's doing something that maybe they shouldn't be, maybe somebody needs to say something about it and keep saying something about it, because as the saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So gets the grease. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. So be loud, keep squeaking. That's what I'm going to do all the way through to 2025. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's been an incredible year. It's been an incredibly interesting year. Thank you for the support, for placing so much value on the work that I am doing, for taking the time to listen to the stories that I have to share and the information that I am trying to convey. Thank you for caring. It means so much. I hope each and every one of you have a very, very happy New Year's Eve, a very, very happy New Year. Put your best foot forward. And as always, remember, Nolite te bastardes carborandorum. Don't let the bastards drag you down.